Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of your Pittsburgh Steelers show on your SteelerFury.com podcast. I'm your host, Bradshaw Ben, a.k.a. Accidental Zen on Twitter. And if you come to SteelerFury.com and look at the message boards, also known as Bradshaw Ben there, and you can feel free to yell at me. Seems like everybody else does. So with me to talk Pittsburgh Steelers football and to break down all things from last week and preview things from next week are two of the best cohorts money can't buy. One is in Pittsburgh, Suburban Zone 22. His name is Steel Perch. I think he's with us. How are you, sir?
I am fully recovered from my weekly Sunday Steelers heart attack and prepared for my next one.
What are you talking about? That was a game that the Steelers won comfortably, I thought, according to you.
Hey, I told you. I think I called that game almost perfect. Steelers would jump out to a nice lead, and they would hold on to win comfortably by 3 points. Yeah, I think I almost nailed it.
I think we I would say just in general the last couple of weeks on the show we have more or less nailed everything. So it's just like listen to the show if you want to have a preview. If you want to be surprised, don't listen to the show. Also with us from the storm-ravaged South. He's somewhere in South Carolina. His name is FC. He's also known as Dom. Dom, how are you? He's with us. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing very well. I'm watching the people around where I live either panicked or very, very happy because not of the storms, because Trevor, little baby Jesus Lawrence, looks like he contracted COVID and he's going to be out a little while. So.
Wait, who's out with COVID?
Trevor Lawrence, the quarterback.
Oh, my God. Now, that's a piece of huge news. Yeah, that's he was talking last week before this happened about that, walking away from the season, I thought. So, I don't know. That sounds rough for South Carolina because I think they pretty much live and die with Clemson, don't they? Thank God they have the Masters.
The University of South Carolina is kind of terrible. And the Clemson fans are very, very loud and very, very vocal. And they wear fucking ugly-ass bright orange. It's like hunting season 12 months a year.
Well, at least you can identify them from far away, so you can stay away, right?
Amen. I'm with your car.
At least they have the Masters down there in November, which is
it's coming up in 2 weeks.
I know. That's very exciting. I know you were all over that. So, gentlemen, use the term very loosely for the three of us. I am going to start by saying, heart attack or not, that was a hell of a football game on Sunday. I think that's as good a Steelers game as I can remember. I mean, I'm really glad they won because it was one of those games that's like a very, very memorable game. FC, I'll start with you. What's your takeaway? How'd you feel about the victory when it happened, and how do you feel about it now?
Oh, I'm very happy with any win. I believe the game was 3 stories in of itself. The first story would be how well the special teams played. Maybe some of the problems were self-inflicted by the Titans, but overall our special teams played very well. I think our defensive game plan was excellent. I give them credit. They showed new wrinkles. They plugged and played. You guys played hard. And I was thrilled to see Tommy Maddox come back and lead the Pittsburgh Steelers offense.
Hey, I watched Tommy Maddox play against Jacksonville. That was no Tommy Maddox, sir.
Tommy Maddox.
What's that?
That was pretty close to Tommy Maddox.
Yeah, I don't know. I felt like, okay, I'll play devil's advocate for a second, and I'll throw it to Perch. We can come back to you to see how you feel about what we say about it. But my take is that I don't. Particularly the last throw is like in his receiver's got a one-on-one against the linebacker, and he dropped a dime into the guy's hands, and the guy doesn't catch it. Now, do you want to say, you don't trust Juju in that situation, and Ben shouldn't either, therefore he shouldn't have thrown it to him? I don't know. The tipped passes, yeah, they're a little bit predictable with the short passing game, but I think if you live by the short passing game, you die by it too. And the play before half, yeah, I mean, I expected them to take a shot in the end zone, so it didn't bother me so much. But, yeah, maybe if they dump it off to the running back out of the backfield, they get a field goal out of that. But I thought that in general –
thought of that if Ben just throws the ball literally out of the end zone.
Yeah, sort of. I thought that he threw a my ball or nobody kind of a ball, but I think that either drifted inside on him or he expected Deontay Johnson to actually make a play on the ball, which he didn't. That part of it actually bothered me almost as much as the pick is you got this young receiver who's not really hungry for the ball in a certain way. So I don't know. Perch, settle this debate. How did you feel about it?
Just that first half, as well as things were going, they were getting a lot of fortuitous bounces. Those tip passes that could have been intercepted weren't. They're driving down for that opening touchdown, and James Conner fucking fumbles the ball, right at the 10-yard line.
Yep.
And any of those things, we've seen that happen in previous seasons and previous games, and that's what caused them to lose. All those balls were bouncing right back to us. So when we get to the second half, it starts going the other way. It was just you put yourself in danger enough times, sooner or later it's going to kill you. That sequence before half was ridiculous. I was calling it as it was breaking down. I'm like, listen, you're up 17. Don't do anything stupid. That interception could have been ran back for a touchdown. You don't really have personnel on the field in position to make that tackle. You got lucky you made it. But once they had that false start, they only needed about 7 or 8 yards to get in the field goal position, maybe 10 at the most, and you had 14 seconds. What's wrong with running a pattern to the sideline? And if you complete it, you kick the field goal. If you don't, you look at it and say, well, we could take one shot at the end zone on a Hail Mary, or you know what, we could just take a knee and be happy with a 17-point lead. They do a lot of stuff like that. It's just dangerous. In the past, from Ben to Juju at the end of the game, they could have used the field goal there to, basically force the Titans to get a touchdown to beat them. I see what Ben saw. He had a linebacker on it. He could have thrown it a little higher, and that's the only critique.
He said the same thing. Sure, yeah.
Another 6 or 8 inches higher, and then at that point, it's not going to, be defender's back is not in play. Juju's going to go up and high point it, or it's an incomplete pass. To get intercepted on that was kind of a fluke play, and then the other one was one of the tip passes. I think, and they've talked about that a little bit with the run pass option stuff and that quick passing game. You're getting the ball out within 2 seconds. Those defensive linemen are, what do they average? 6'4", 6'5", they're big guys.
Sure.
They're going to get frustrated trying to rush after a while, and they're going to see that quick passing game. They're just going to stop, put their hands up, get them in the lane. Ben still throws those kind of 3-quarter delivery. I don't know if you ever played baseball, just different deliveries.
Yep.
You almost got to be 12-6 on those because you want to get up high over the guys and dump it down. You're not throwing it downfield. You don't need all your arm strength and your accuracy. You want to be more high to low. And hopefully that's something he works on because he has been getting a lot of passes tipped. But it was just another crazy. As soon as they go out to a big lead, I get so nervous. I just that something's going to happen. Guess what? It's a 2-play drive. It's a 70-some yard pass to A.J. Brown, and they're back in it. And it's a stupid 2 turnovers, and they're back in it. And anything that can go wrong starts snowballing up until the very, very end where they make the one key stop they need. It just drives you crazy.
Yeah. Well, but FC, the thing is, the league right now is just set up this way, man. There's been so many giant comebacks this year. Just the other night that it was Seattle, I think, that had like a 20-point lead and coughed it up. It just feels like the way that the rules are, the way the game is, the way the teams approach it when they're down, it's just hard to really put the brakes on it. And I felt like that throw to Juju, settling for a field goal there would have been a huge mistake. The way the momentum in the game was going, if you give Tennessee the ball back down 6, they're going to be throwing in the end zone for a chance to win the game by the end of the game. I mean, that to me is like these teams that when Atlanta accidentally scored and the other team is celebrating because they know they're going to take the ball and take it down the length of the field. So, I mean, yeah, nobody likes to turn it over 3 times. But I felt like actually the offense did pretty well. FC, they had only 1 drive in the entire game where they really were like turtle ball. Otherwise they were kind of playing their game, which is what we always ask them to do, is to not take their foot off the gas. Did you see it differently than that?
I did not. I had other issues with the offense. I mean, Ben is the one that is going to be confrontational, or is going to be the Steeler Nation is going to have a problem with. My other issues, I think, a lot of people would have an issue with. I had a big problem with personnel usage. I thought we seen too much, Jalen Samuel, too much Deontay Johnson, and far too little Chase Claypool. He has to be a part of the offense at this point. because he makes the offense dynamic.
Sure.
I think Ben tries to get people the ball to get them going, and I don't think that's always the best thing. I think he forced a few balls there, keep on. I don't have the play count in front of me, but I've seen Chase Claypool on the sidelines a lot of times on third downs.
Yep.
And I have a big issue with that.
No, they got James Washington on the field and not Chase Claypool on third down.
Right. I got a problem with that. James Washington should now be entrenched as the fourth wide receiver, and I'm not sure if Chase Claypool shouldn't be the starter in the base along with Juju Smith-Schuster, just because what both can give you, blocking in the run game. They both can pick off an inside linebacker. They both show they're willing to pick off an inside linebacker off the motions, pick off an outside linebacker. Those are things that Deontay Johnson really can't do because he's so damn small.
Yeah. And
those are options that you have. And that one block can change a 2-yard run into a 12-yard run.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm all for guys like Ebron and Deontay Johnson, on run plays. If they're spread out away from the ball and they are making somebody cover them, that's better than they'd be doing if they tried to block that guy. So, I think you have the ability to use him that way. But yeah,
I'm actually surprised with Eric Ebron in the run game. How about that? I had a huge issue. I thought he was going to be a non-factor in the run game, and he actually has been a lot better than I expected.
I thought he was, in fairness, I did think he was better this week. It was his best week, probably blocking. But I feel like it's, still you're talking about a guy that you give him an angle block or something where he's got a fighting chance. Just a straight up, one-on-one in your face kind of a Oklahoma drill block, not so much.
No, he ain't going to block James Harrison at the point of attack. Square up. No, he's not going to. Not many tight ends in the NFL are going to that.
That's true. I don't know, Perch, I feel like we started off overly negatively about a game that the Steelers, beat an undefeated team at home. And not only that, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Tennessee's pretty good. I know we talked last week about how they were maybe a little better than they look on paper, as an actual football team to play. I think they're in the famous words of Mike Sullivan, the Pittsburgh Penguins coach, they're hard to play. They liked being hard to play. That is that's a compliment. What did you make of this Tennessee Titans team?
They are who I thought they were. Just that they have a very diverse offense where if you're not a stud defensive line, tough up the middle team like the Steelers, they're just going to run all over you. You saw what happened to Baltimore in the playoffs last year. It's why Baltimore completely changed their defensive front in the offseason. They just couldn't stop them. And that's what Tennessee is going to do to most teams. And if you can, or you can slow them down a little bit, they're going to keep that run game to keep you honest and use play-action passing. They've got some good receivers like A.J. Brown. They've got good tight ends. And Tannehill, since he's been there, has been playing pretty good ball. So I think it's probably, outside of the Chiefs, it's probably the best offense in the AFC that we would have to play. Ravens present some different challenges, but, it's just a really good offense. I still don't have a ton of respect for the Titans defense. I thought the Steelers probably should have scored more than what they actually did, and they would have if they didn't completely shoot themselves in the foot in the second half. But, I think some of the story of that game is, I think it's time Steelers fans especially put some respect on Vince Williams' name. That guy is a motherfucking stud, okay? If this was the 1990s, he would be a perennial Pro Bowler. He is outstanding at what he does. He's physical. He tackles well. He hits hard. He's an enforcer. He's a tone setter. And you know what? People complain, it's a passing league now, and he's not going to do well in the pass. You know what? I've seen Ryan Shazier and Devin Bush beat a lot. And you know what? They aren't as a solid tackler. Now, granted, he doesn't have the speed and the athleticism and can't cover sideline to sideline and do all that crazy stuff. But that guy has been so consistent and so solid. And, people were talking about, we need to cut him in the offseason because we've got a $4 or $5 million salary cap hit. And I tell you what, he is just such a tone setter for that defense. The amount of tackle for losses and in the way that he can wrap up and take a big physical back like that and frickin' just erase him out of the game. And Spillane, that hit that dude put on those guys down the at the goal line, which he pretty much blew his own shoulder out trying to tackle Derrick Henry there. I mean, that was tremendous too. But I think we'll start to be tested this week more against Lamar Jackson and against better tight ends like Mark Andrews, with those more physical, maybe a little bit slower inside linebackers. But man, that's just something. If we're going to talk about the Steelers' defense and something positive, those two inside linebackers did a hell of a job, and Stephen Tuitt's been outstanding too. Yeah,
I agree. FC, I thought Terrell Edmonds played a really good game, and I feel like, for all the deserved criticism earlier in his career, it feels like kind of coming together for him this year. Do you disagree with that? I know you were hard on him.
I do. I've seen banter and conversations, and what I think the Steelers have done is simplified his role so much and made it so simple for him that they've stressed other players because of his deficiencies, where you can only hide him so much. So what that does is that puts more stress on Mike Hilton in coverage, puts more coverage or more problems for Cameron Sutton. Unfortunately for Minka Fitzpatrick, it limits what you can do with him because he's so terrible. And the Steelers are playing with 10 defenders, and they do everything in their power to hide Evans.
Okay, but FC. But listen, he's top 10 in the NFL for lowest passer rating when targeted. So I'm saying it's like he's playing primarily tight end.
Really not in coverage. They hide him. He's put in a position where he really can't get burnt. So that puts stress on Joe Hayden, where he has 108 quarterback rating allowed, or on Steven Nelson, who's up to 82 quarterback rating allowed. He's that bad. And yes, I look forward to him being replaced on the defense. And it limits what the Steelers can do. It limits what they can do in the man coverage schemes. It's going to really limit what they can do against the Ravens this week.
Yeah, well, Andrews is a particularly tough matchup for anybody. I just feel like Devin Bush. They took the responsibilities for covering the tight end away from Bush because he wasn't really up to that task, and Edmonds has done a pretty good job with that. I just feel like you're running out of guys to be able to run out there to make plays on tight ends. Perch, how do you see this?
I tell you what, I'm glad you brought that up. The last 2 weeks was the best football Terrell Edmonds has ever played in the NFL. I mean, he's been pretty good, actually breaking up passes, tight coverage, stuff like that, short tackling. I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that nickel corner position, because Cam Sutton damn near had a pick six last week, and he had that big interception the week before. I just think that guy's got so much talent as a cover man. Like, I want him on the field more. I know they love Mike Hilton because he's physical and he attacks the line of scrimmage, and he's a pretty solid tackler for a little midget, and he gets all those sacks. He's got a knack for doing that stuff.
Yeah, really good blitzer.
Sutton, maybe not against the Ravens, because I don't think they're going to pass a ton. But, if you need that extra corner to cover a tight end or something, I'd rather have Sutton out there. But when we start playing teams that have really good passing attacks and depth to it, man, I'd like Cam Sutton out there. I think that he's a guy who could be good enough to be a starting corner in a year, if they needed to move Hayden or somebody for cap reasons. But all that nonsense that went on with Instagram this week, I don't know what the hell any of that's about. If he's unhappy or if it had anything to do with football at all, but
it was so vague. It was so vague, man. Like, I don't really understand how it became a story. People are like looking for breadcrumbs, I guess.
I agree. I don't know why the reporters has gone up and flat out asked him, or maybe they have and he hasn't given an answer. But like I said, he's a guy that I've had earmarked for the better part of the last couple of years, because I think I have a lot of faith in the guy. I'm somebody we need to lock up and keep here long. I'd rather keep him than Hilton, because that choice is going to come at the end of the year. You can only keep one, and maybe they don't keep either. But that's where I stand on it. I think Edmonds is playing his best ball. I don't want to throw dirt on him this week, because I've thrown dirt on him for a couple of years now, and he's played well for the last couple. Like I said, Hilton is really good at what he does, but to me, Sutton's the better all-around player.
Yeah, I mean, he's still a polarizing player. Maybe I'm just making too much of it because he just looks so much better than he did last year. It's not to say that he's necessarily great, and there may well be a better replacement someplace, but I don't know. I'm not sure. I feel like it's the biggest problem they have right now.
He's a strong safety, though. I mean, look at other strong safeties around the league. Not a lot of those guys are great in coverage. That's why they play strong safety, not free. He's good near the line. If he's covering tight ends and getting some pass breakups and not giving up big plays and blown coverages, he's doing his job. You don't need 11 studs on a defense. If you have all 11 that are at least solid, you have the makings of a great D. And he's one of those guys you need to be solid.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. FC, the Steelers' run defense right now feels like it is on another level. Like I remember back, in the era when people ran the ball more as a focus of their offense than is the case now. Some Steelers teams that would just barely give you nothing. It would basically give you nothing running the football, and it's like those days are kind of the focus like that is gone from defenses. But this one is playing the run, not just like they clog it up and make a wall, but they're making plays in the backfield. They're punishing the other team's offensive line and run game. Why do you think they're so good at it right now? Is it just they have a lot of talent, or is there something specific about what they're doing?
Combination of the two. Has any player in Steelers' memory had more of a resurgence than Tyson Alu? Because I want him gone. They moved him inside, and he's channeling his inner Kiyombo on Olhoffen. He is a more pleasant surprise to me than the play of Spillane, I thought was excellent, to that of Chase Claypool, who I thought was excellent, even more than Dawson, who, when given the opportunity, was excellent. Because I thought the Alu was done, washed up, and basically a bad signing. And lo and behold, he is a fantastic 3-4 nose tackle, playing an under roll, playing a penetrating role, not the classic Casey Hampton, not Joel Steed, but more of a Gerald Williams, Kimo Vaughn, Olhoffen. He almost caused 2 fumbles in the Titans game. Unbelievable swim move to the left and right. He plays with power. That is one of the keys. And step into it in Cam Hayward ain't bad. Vince Williams, the heartbeat of this defense, the Ryan Clark of this defense, the Mike Wagner of this defense, a guy that's not going to be the first name that comes out of your mouth, but is a key component of what we do.
Sure.
So the Steelers have a great scheme. They have great players, and they're playing together. They're playing as an 11-man unit.
Yeah, that's the thing about run game. It only takes one guy to mess it up. And to your point about Alu, he made a play where he basically bench pressed the center and pushed him back into the handoff, which is one of those things you don't see every day. That was like a Casey Hampton-esque kind of maneuver, which I found was pretty great. Just for a second, talk about the other side of football. The Steelers' run game, I think coming into the season, setting aside 2019, let's just call 2019 an aberration in every respect. Still, coming into the season, I would have said, I don't think the Steelers' run game is going to be terrible, but I would say, the best hope would be that the Steelers' run game is good enough to complement the rest of their team and so on and so forth. It's to this point, I think actually their run game has maybe been pretty good. Like I would call it above average to maybe even better than that. Wondering how you feel about the Steelers' run game. Am I accurate in my assessment?
Yeah, there's a really good podcast online. It's called the SteelerFury.com podcast. I was listening to it last year, and this really good-looking guy in there was talking about how the Steelers had the least amount of window dressing on their run game of anybody in the league. Everything was just freaking line up and go up the middle, and they hired this guy named Matt Canada this year, and he's completely just put a lot of touches on it that you could tell that weren't there last year. And you're right, though. I mean, I feel like I've talked about it extensively for the last 2 years, but it's just the changes of some of the window dressing and the formations and stuff that they're doing. and handing it to the running backs and attacking the edges more instead of just going up the middle and just, traditional formation with no motion has made a huge difference. But they're able to consistently extend these long drives. I heard some stat, and I don't remember what the hell it was, but something about the Steelers have the longest average time of possession per drive of anybody in the league, and somebody else can look it up or correct me on that. But if you just kind of look back at a lot of the games, it's like we were joking at halftime. Well, the Steelers cut their punter this week because they knew they weren't going to need one. Just because they just extend these long drives. I guess the flip side of that coin is it also protects Ben a little bit, and he's getting the ball out in 2.0 seconds last game, and the quickest in the league. The downside of that is kind of missed the deep passing game and the big explosive plays, which really aren't coming anymore. So maybe that'll get mixed in here as the season progresses. But you can't complain about the results. They're consistently putting up about 30 points a week on everybody they play, and it's just they can mix consistent runs and short passes and move chains. And Ben was really good on third down. We talked about Ben had 3 interceptions last game. He was killing it on third down that first half. And really, 2 of those interceptions, one was on a tip, and the other was a stupid, end of the half, throw up a Hail Mary, who cares what happens to it. Really weren't his fault. And even the third one was, we talked about before, he just maybe an inch or 2 low and it hit somebody in the back, whatever. But he actually played a pretty good game, aside from us, having that lasting memory of the second half, scoring 3 points and ended on an interception.
Yeah, it's kind of, if his play had been mixed up, like if you just shuffled the drives, and it ended with a really great drive capped off by a touchdown, you'd be like, wow, what a great game. I'm sorry, Perch, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was done. Like I said, I just feel like I've rambled about this for 2 years. Yep.
By the way, Steelers. Go ahead.
I was just saying, begging for it last year and then having it implemented this year. And, I'm happy about it. And boy, it's been a huge difference in the offense.
They were bottom 5 last year in pre-snap motion. And I believe they're 2 or 3 this year, maybe number 2 in pre-snap motion. So, big difference in that regard. They are also number 2 that's the line of scrimmage, time of possession per drive. They're 4th in time of possession per drive on offense.
This is just further proof that Mike Tomlin does listen to this podcast, because we talked about that last year, and he listened and fixed it. You heard his I don't know if you heard his presser after the game, but somebody asked him the question, hey, Mike, you usually ask to defer when you win the coin toss, but this week you took the ball. Why? He said to shut you guys up because, I listened to that SteelerFury.com podcast, and they were complaining about how we haven't scored a touchdown in 24 straight games. So I'm pretty sure he's listening right now. Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Yeah, something like that, because, he's got nothing else to do. FC, I feel like it's been an hour since we talked to you, but I'll give you the last word on the wrap up of Tennessee and Pittsburgh. Anything else that we didn't talk about you wanted to add?
The coverage units, both sides of the ball. I mean, field position is a very integral part of the game of football, especially when November and December starts, rolling around. And they did a really nice job. So, making teams drive 60, 65 yards, 70 yards to get a touchdown is a key element of the game. And the Steelers, in that regard, have played some pretty smart, solid football.
Yeah, number 1 in kick coverage in the NFL this year so far. So
unbelievable.
Yeah, that's a like, that never happens around here. So we're very excited about that. I have another question, but I'll put it in the context of this week's matchup. Let's talk a little bit about this week's matchup, because it's another 5-star matchup. Amazingly enough, after last week's game, and as sort of like tough opponent as that was, and as great a game as it was, this week it doesn't get any easier. It's your Pittsburgh Steelers traveling to Baltimore to play the Ravens, one of the preseason favorites in the NFL. And this is sort of a double-edged sword. It's like maybe the Steelers have a little bit of a letdown after last week, and maybe Baltimore is something to prove because they haven't really played to the level they would like to play so far this year. So I'm just wondering how to get started with this matchup. Perch, I'll start with the Steelers offensive line and the new additions for Baltimore. First of all, Calais Campbell, coming to the Ravens this offseason, and now adding Ngakwe How do I do?
Yannick Ngakoue.
Ngakoue. Yeah, pretty good. So, you now have 2 Steelers killers added to that line, and I'm sure they knew they were bringing in a couple of guys that were have been Steelers killers. Didn't hurt their cause to get signed by Baltimore. How do you feel like the Steelers' offensive line deals with those 2 guys and the rest of the Baltimore front?
Well, Ben's going to have a bitch of a time throwing over 6'8", isn't he?
Yeah.
Especially on those short little dumps. But I don't like answering your questions. I'll just talk about what I feel like.
All right, do it as usual.
We're going to use the quick passing game and the run and all that, blah blah blah. I think we'll be able to neutralize that defensive line. The big concern I have in this game is the secondary of the Ravens. Marlon Humphrey has forced twice as many fumbles as the entire Steelers defense. And you saw what he did to Juju, basically to cost us a game. And we've got some guys who've known to cough up the ball. James Conner, Juju, Deontay, both of our tight ends, guys who've been had the ball ripped from their hands.
Yep.
Yeah, Ebron especially. It just the Ravens have forced 13 fumbles. I think that's leading the league. If it's not, it's real close to it. But that's what I get really concerned about going into a game like this. I think Juju's fumbles that he's had over the years were, a little bit more, rare. Or Humphrey made a great play on him on the one. But Deontay Johnson's so frail. He's great with the ball in his hands. He's so shifty and so quick. I'm always worried he's going to get killed or fumble just because, of his makeup. Our running backs, even Benny Snell has had fumble problems this year. So that's the thing I think that can really tip this game. If I was Tomlin, if you're listening still, hopefully it's not past your bedtime, man, you got to coach that up this week because that's the number one thing that jumps off with the Ravens. That and they cover really well. I mean, they've got, Humphrey, I think, is probably one of the best cornerbacks in the league. Peters is pretty good. He's, he gambles and can turn a pick six on you, or you could light him up and chew him up on double moves. And just having somebody like Jimmy Smith to be a third guy that, that can kind of match up pretty well with the depth the Steelers have at receivers. So defensive line versus our offensive line, I'm not as worried about. It's more those secondary guys and the amount of fumbles that they cause as a defense.
Yeah, turnovers, I'm sure, coming off of last week are going to be a big focus of the Steelers practice this week, I'm sure. FC, how do you feel about this offensive line, defensive line matchup? Talked about some individual matchups in there.
Sure. Well, Baltimore's defense is pretty massive. I mean, they are. Campbell, Derek Wolfe is, but this isn't 2016 or 2017. I like to point that out. Caleb Campbell and Derek Wolfe aren't the players that they were. Yannick Ngakoue has lost a step from what he was in Jacksonville. He's still an effective pass rusher. Caleb Campbell's still a very effective 3-4 defensive end. I think Derek Wolfe's a little bit past his expiration date. Brandon Williams is a massive nose tackle. Where I think you can make some hay is through the middle of the Ravens defense. I'm not a very big fan of Chuck Clark. I think Patrick Queen has 3 good plays and then 2 horrible plays. Obviously, the game I went and I watched a ton of was the Kansas City Chiefs, and I've seen what did the Kansas City Chiefs do to the Baltimore Ravens, and the Baltimore Ravens defense struggles with quickness and speed. If the Steelers' offensive line can hold up, I think that we can give them some problems in the passing game. They could not think of covering Mecole Hardman. They could not think of covering Pringle. Tyreek Hill's Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce's Travis Kelce. Marcus Robinson. It was the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th receivers for the Kansas City Chiefs that drove them nuts. Kansas City Chiefs also didn't allow a sack. I don't believe they turned the football over. And they basically pummeled the Ravens in Baltimore. Baltimore has a very, very, very nasty defense, and I think that they feel this is a big game in their season, and it's a humongous game for the Steelers. This is probably the biggest matchup this year in the NFL. And, it's AFC North. I understand the weather's supposed to be a little bit tricky, so.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the Steelers recently, Perch, have won against the pretty good success against the Ravens. With Ben, the last 5 games, they're 4-1. In those games, they've averaged, this is something that jumped out at me, 44.6 passing attempts per game. So that thing about beating the Ravens with a little bit of speed, and the Ravens are kind of built to win the way the Steelers used to play against them, this slugfest in the trenches. But it feels like the Steelers recently have decided that we were right on the show. Apparently they did listen. That the way to beat the Ravens, instead of trying to like punch them in the right in their iron jaw, was to try to like nibble at their edges and kind of beat them with speed. How do you see the Steelers' approach in this game? Do you think they'll stick with that, or do you feel like they're not really quite ready to commit to that passing game again against the Ravens?
FC made a good point. Just watching what Kansas City has done really 2 years in a row against the Ravens defense, Steelers have a lot of weapons. I mean, we could be multiple and diverse and beat you by running up the middle if that's what the game calls for, and power football, or short passing game, or just airing it out. So, I think that the 45 passes with the secondary that those guys have might not be the exact way to go. I think it's got to be a little bit more balanced, similar to what they did against Tennessee. But these teams know each other so well. They come up with all these different wrinkles every time they see each other. The games are always very similar, but slightly different. The thing that really worries me is, Harbaugh's 10-2 after a bye week. They've had 2 full weeks to prepare for the Steelers. We didn't even get a bye this year to even kind of put, self-scout and put some different wrinkles in. And then when we play these guys again, it's on a Thursday, a short week. You don't get, and that Ravens offense is so much different than the rest of the league, just because Lamar Jackson's Lamar Jackson, and just the added threat that he has for you, and with the ball in his hands, running the football. So it's going to make it a challenge. But yeah, you really don't know what you're going to see as far as the game plan, because like I said, these teams mix things up because they know each other so well and they play each other so often.
Yeah, thing is, Perch, though, you said more balanced game plan similar to the Tennessee Titans, but Steelers threw the ball almost 50 times in that game. It's like the NFL. You have to adjust your sensibilities to the 2020 NFL, because that felt like a balanced game, more or less. But, man, that was a lot of passing game.
How often do you get 75 plays, though? I mean, that was the thing. The Steelers, in that first half, they just completely dominated it. They had the ball the whole half. 75 plays, that's a pretty good bit. So 50 runs and 25 or 50 passes and 25 runs. But it's pretty rare.
Yeah, also, I think you're rarely going to play a team that's that bad on third downs. I mean, Tennessee is the worst team in the NFL, I think, on third down on defense. So that does make sort of sense. FC, the cornerbacks for Baltimore are deep and really talented, but I'm not sure they match up that well against the Steelers' talent. Humphrey is the one guy out of the 3 top corners that can play in the slot. Seems logical that he'll play a lot over Juju. But you're going to end up with Jimmy Smith against, either Chase Claypool, that maybe is a little bit too fast for him, or against Deontay Johnson, who's maybe a little bit too quick for him. What do you think about that? And Jimmy Smith didn't even practice, I think, today. So it seems like there might be a little something to attack there. How do you feel about those matchups?
Throws it to God, it's open. I mean, it sounds simple. It sounds a little bit like a dick answer. But
it is. That's okay.
Coverage is the guy, and that's the good thing about having as many weapons as we have. But I think it's paramount that you pull safeties out of the box, even for the mid-range passing game, so those crossers can be more effective. And the way that you pull safeties out of the box is you have to vertically make teams afraid. And that is a role that I think that Chase Claypool and Washington and Johnson and even Juju Smith-Schuster from time to time have to fill. The Steelers have to add the 9 route. They have to add the vertical passing game. Even if you don't throw the ball, you're put the fear in the coordinator. And eventually, Ben's going to throw the fucking ball. He's going to see, single high safety. He's like, and he's going to take the shot at Claypool. I'm sure that Ben, deep down, probably wants to take a few more shots than we're taking.
Sure, and I also think the intermediate game, the stuff in between, if you get the threat going of the deep ball, that opens up the middle of the field in the intermediate game, which, they've shown a sort of some tiny whispers of that the last couple of weeks. The throw on third down to Ebron, the Juju play in the seam that he dove for. So there is a little bit more action going on than there has been earlier in the year, but feels like, as you said, if you don't get them a little bit scared of covering you deep, it's hard to make hay with that. Perch, if they do end up with Marcus Peters on Deontay Johnson, which I think is probably the matchup we'll see most of the time, feels like the danger with him is, he's a guy that plays off and he's waiting to jump those routes, and particularly that quick passing game. If Ben is just going to make a decision pre-snap and throw the football, that feels like it could be some troubles. That's something that we ought to watch out for.
That's a double-edged sword. It can go either way. Deontay's so damn quick. He might be the quickest change of direction receiver in the league, and that's the elite part of his game. And I could see him, just not even a double move, just making a cut and Peters guessing the wrong way and turning into a 50-yard gain for the Steelers, with Johnson just outrunning him. So,
sure.
Or it could be, he reads it right and picks one off. But, it can go either way. I just think that matchup probably favors the Steelers a little bit. I'm more afraid of Marlon Humphrey. I think that wherever he's at, that guy's probably not getting a lot of balls. If it's Juju taking him, great. It's like we said before, you've got to put your third guy in the game that's going to be able to win. And you got to have the right receivers in there. I don't think it's James Washington. If you have Chase Claypool on old man Jimmy Smith, that I think could put some, pretty good matchups in your favor.
Sure. No, it feels like that is Jimmy Smith is not the Jimmy Smith he once was.
I have a very good answer, though, for Marlon Humphrey, and also, surprisingly, for Marcus Peters. And it could be a little bit surprising. It's not the classic thought process where I tell Juju Smith, Chase Claypool, every single rundown, you put it on them. You make them know they're in a war, because both are stupid son of a bitches that'll throw a punch if they're really getting going after. And they both have shown it a propensity in the past to be mental midgets and take themselves out of games, literally. And that's the type of shit that you have to do in the Steelers-Ravens game. You got to find a line and walk it. Don't go over it, but walk it. That's what Ryan Clark did with Willis McGahee. It's what Hines Ward did with, his entire career with the Ravens. And I think that the team that can control their emotions the best is going to win this game.
Yeah, I could see that. It does feel like a game where the talent is pretty similar, and the not necessarily the scheme part of coaching, but the sort of preparing your team part of coaching is going to make a big difference. Just feels like it's a setup for that. First, let's flip over to the other side of the ball. The Baltimore offense. I know we're Steelers fans. We see the game that happened last year, and we think, they're going to be able to do that again. They figured out Lamar Jackson. They know how to play him. And I would say the Steelers' defense is better this year than it was last year, maybe overall. But I'm imagining that Baltimore is going to adjust from what they did in that first game last year. How do you think this plays out in terms of strategically the approach for Baltimore in this game?
I think the Steelers' approach to Baltimore is going to be stop the run and make Lamar Jackson be a quarterback and beat you with his arm. Contain him. Don't let him get out of the pocket when he does. I think they said the same. Was it last week, or who was the quarterback they played recently? It ran a little bit. I don't know, but the word was
put the hot sauce on
every time he gets up. Yeah, put a little hot sauce on him and hit him every time he comes out of the pocket. And that's pretty much what they did. Lamar Jackson throws everything pretty much to the middle of the field. He's going to do play action, or he's going to get out of the pocket, or he's going to just throw up the seam to his tight ends. He's got Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. It's pretty much that passing game. The rest of the guys don't do a whole hell of a lot. It's the run game, and if you could stop their running backs and then keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket, make him beat you, make him read defenses, blitz him, show different coverages. I don't think he's great at reading the defense and adjusting and getting out of plays and doing things on the fly there. So I think that'll be the Steelers' approach. The Ravens are just going to try to do what they do and mix in runs and roll Lamar out and get him out of the pocket and throw a lot to their tight ends and trying to hit a big play downfield on occasion with Hollywood Brown.
FC, the thing is, that the Ravens haven't really been winning with offense this year. Their defense is really good, and their special teams is all world, and that's really how they won games. But the other thing is that you get this quarterback who, you can talk about all the stuff that he doesn't do well, but when your quarterback can take off and run and just sort of like, convert a long third down and just, kind of undo all the good you did on defense, for the previous couple of plays. That's, if you're the coach, don't you stress to your defense not to be demoralized if the guy gets a first down running, because it's like, that's going to happen in this game. It's going to happen in every game with him.
Well, I'm going to bitch at my defense. They're not going to be demoralized, but they're going to hear about it. I think the Steelers' game plan actually from the first game of the Ravens last year was actually stolen by the Tennessee Titans in the playoffs. Cause
looked like it. Yep.
Pretty much identically did. And I think what the Steelers did was steal a lot of things that the San Diego Chargers did the year before to the Ravens in the playoffs. The biggest difference in this Ravens offense, and I honestly believe this, is they lost the greatest offensive player in their franchise history to retirement last offseason. And I think it's very, very, very overlooked by most people. And that player, by the way, is Marshall Yanda.
Yep.
They're starting right guard. You want to talk about a Steelers killer over the years? That's the guy. What the Steelers are going to do, I honestly believe, is they're going to attempt to chip off the run game. And from there, they're going to spy Jackson. The question is, who they're going to spy him with. You don't have Devin Bush. You may not have
Ulysses Gilbert.
I don't know if he's going to play or not.
No.
That player might end up being a Cam Sutton. That player might end up being a Justin Lane. I don't think the Steelers are going to be in the business of letting Lamar Jackson run free. My biggest concern is T.J. Watt and Bud Dupree have to set the edge, and they have to force everything back inside. The quarterbacks have to tackle in space. Those are your basic fundamentals. That is what led Lamar Jackson to that classic 3-1 playoff ratio, which is 3 turnovers for every 1 touchdown he's thrown in his playoff career. If you make him read a defense, he's not very, very accurate, and he doesn't always make the best decision with ball placement. And I feel the Steelers choke out the Ravens' run game. I think that this could be the game where Minkah Fitzpatrick has multiple interceptions because Jackson's accuracy is just not there, and he cannot throw the ball outside the hashes. Perch hit the nail on the head with that when he said that their passing game is an interior passing game. The Marquise Brown on, flag routes, the Mark Andrews on the seam, double moves. I don't think the Ravens are built to pass block the Steelers' pass rush. I don't even think the Steelers are going to get into heavy blitz packages like a lot of people expect them to do. I don't think it's going to be necessary.
Yeah, well, by the way, stat I didn't get to throw while we were on that side of the football. Baltimore apparently is like 1 or 2 in the league blitzing, even more than the Steelers. The Steelers have utilized the blitz a lot. So,
how about this? I think their defensive backs have the most sacks in the NFL. I believe they have like 8 or 9 different players with 2 sacks. Both their starting safeties has 2 sacks. I believe Marlon Humphreys has 2 sacks.
Sure.
They from all over the place. Everyone.
Yeah, when they played Cincinnati, I think their defensive backs had 5 sacks in that game alone.
I mean, here's the thing. I mean, the Steelers, stopping the run has been always focused, so far this year on stopping, the big running back and so on and so forth. And yeah, they limited Carson Wentz's ability to take off with the football or whatever. But Baltimore's especially weird. I mean, I guess their leading rusher, Mark Ingram, who may or may not even play in this game, has the same amount of carries as Lamar Jackson. Like basically they're 1 and 1A in the run game. So it isn't just the quarterback escaping the pocket. It's these designed runs, that'll get you.
That's what they're back this year. Kid from Rutgers.
Really like him, Gus the Bus.
I do like him as well. He reminds me of a Steelers back.
Yeah, I would take him. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of talk, Perch, about Dobbins. If Ingram can't go, that Dobbins is somehow going to be an upgrade over, Mark Ingram. But I don't know. What's your take on Dobbins? I mean, I think you were a little bit higher on him in the draft than I was. I'm not really a fan.
I wasn't a huge Dobbins guy, but boy, it's surprising to me he's not getting the ball more, which makes me think maybe he's not as good as what a lot of people thought he was going to be going there. But, just to kind of touch on FC's point earlier about the Steelers' game plan against Lamar Jackson last time they played, and that San Diego game plan and the Titans game plan, even go back to the Kansas City game this year. Lamar Jackson, 28 passes, 97 yards. Basically another good 3-4 defense that followed that same script of what San Diego, Pittsburgh, and Tennessee did. Shows me Lamar Jackson hasn't grown and hasn't really figured out what people have done to stop him. So, if one of their running backs is out, and it can make it for a long day. If they can't run on the Steelers front, Lamar Jackson's gonna have some issues.
I can tell you why I had absolutely no interest in J.K. Dobbins. He played 4 games against what I consider 4 premier college teams, and he tapped out in 3 of them where no mods. And if a dog shows me his belly once, okay. If you have a dog show me his belly 3 or 4 times, I start questioning his toughness. And I think that's what it's a matter of with J.K. Dobbins. He looks like Tarzan. He absolutely does. But, you look at what he did at the Combine, laissez-faire, thought it was a waste of his time. And that's how he plays the game a lot of times. 3rd and 3, he stepped out after a 2-yard gain because he doesn't want to take on that strong safety. He doesn't want to take on Terrell Edmonds. He doesn't want to take on, Minka Fitzpatrick, where he's a 230-pound back. I expect him not to only take them on, I expect him to try to run them the fuck over.
Yeah, to use that size, yeah. Well, maybe he'll get the talking to that Derrick Henry got, and will start being more physical someday. But hopefully that day is not Sunday or anytime soon. Gentlemen, I'm sure we could go on all day, but let's move it along to our illustrious pick segment, brought to us by
Dean Blandino. Sports and shit. Let's talk about sports and shit. They got your dog beds, koozies, t-shirts, everything you can think of, all your sports needs. They also are actually a sponsor of this podcast, where we would like to thank them. And our last person, I can't remember his name. It's John something. He's another one of the referee officials. He basically, he's the guy that's with Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth. He basically told Chris Collinsworth he doesn't know a damn thing about football, and he should basically just stick to the law. And it made me kind of happy. John Perry.
Yeah. So wait, John Perry told Chris Collinsworth that Chris Collinsworth doesn't?
Like, Chris, I don't think you realize the guy over Mike. He's like, Chris, I don't think you know what you're talking about.
I did notice that John Perry was like talking something about football, about some, he had pulled out some statistic about the game. So maybe he thinks of himself as like an expert, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic to follow as the year goes on. It's going to start to sound, their booth will start to sound more and more like our show. Let's pick a couple of games. I got an interesting one for you. Las Vegas Raiders going into Cleveland, and the Raiders are a 3-point underdog against your Cleveland Browns. Are we not in the part of the Cleveland Browns Baker Mayfield cycle where he just he felt disrespected, so he went out against a terrible opponent and played great against them, and now the next step in that cycle, if I'm not mistaken, is to be terrible again, right?
Yeah, I can't comprehend how Cleveland's a favorite in that game. I understand the game's in Cleveland, but the Raiders have been playing good football, and they probably had the toughest schedule in the league. They played the Panthers, who are playing pretty well this year, outside of tonight because Teddy Bridgewater just got decapitated if you're not watching the game. They beat the Saints. They lost to the Patriots. Close game with the Bills. They beat the Chiefs. Gave the Bucs a bit of a game. I think the Raiders are, for 3-3, they're pretty well accomplished. The Browns, I don't see it. I think the Raiders go in there and win by a touchdown.
Hey, FC, how about you?
Wow, this is a tough game. I don't see Baker Mayfield throwing 5 touchdown passes to tight ends in this game. I honestly don't. But I'm going to take the Browns to win but not cover. I think they're going to win by 3 points. I actually believe in the Browns a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't think the Browns are going to win this game. I think Vegas is really a tough team to pick in any kind of a road game. You just don't have any memory of them playing great in any road game ever. Not for like 25 years. But I just kind of feel like it's sort of a letdown game for Cleveland. I feel like when they feel like they're on top of the world and playing a team they think they should beat. That's a good team or a decent team. Their track record in those games has not been particularly good. So I'll go with the Browns. Let's talk about your New Orleans Saints and Chicago Bears. The Saints are a 2.5-point favorite. They are a road favorite against the Chicago Bears. The Bears really struggled last week, but I don't know. I'll throw it to you first, FC. What do you think about this game?
I think the Saints are going to win. Allen Robinson's going to be out with a concussion. Man, Matt Nagy's a terrible coach because that defense is for real. They really are. And they should sue that offense for lack of support, man. So, yeah, I'll take the Saints. I don't like the Saints. I think they're a fraud, but I think the Bears actually are a bigger fraud, and they're going to be lost without Allen Robinson.
Perch, on top of all that, do you think the Bears pull off the trade for Ryan Fitzpatrick?
It wouldn't hurt at this point, right?
Yeah,
I don't believe in the Bears either. I think their defense is decent. I don't think it's like great, good enough to carry that offense. And they're smoke and mirrors too. They beat 4 mediocre teams, and they pulled off the upset against Tampa Bay somehow. But Panthers are pretty mediocre. The Falcons are awful. The Giants are awful. The Lions are always awful. Not impressed in any of those games. They played the Rams and got their ass kicked. Lost to the Colts by 8. To me, it's just it's one of those teams at the end of the year they're going to average out to be an 8-8, 9-7 sort of team. So I think the Saints are still a step better. I also agree that I don't think the Saints are a Super Bowl contender this year, but they're better than the Bears. Saints to win and cover.
Yeah, I think the Bears. I mean, their offense. Like who can figure? Especially since they lost Tirico and they're like, they're sort of one speed on offense right now, which is and the quarterback play has been. Maybe a hair better with Foles in there, but certainly not very much. And their defense is very good, except for the one thing that they don't do particularly well is stop a heavy run team. And yes, the Saints can run the football a little bit, but that's not really who they are. I have not been impressed at all with what Breeze is doing there. And I feel like, it's like a weather game. You're in Chicago against a really good defense. And that the Saints aren't really going to come out there and pound the rock against the Bears. I think it's a very low-scoring game. I'm not sure the Bears have enough to win it, but I'll take 2.5 points for a home team. That is, it wins more than you think they should. I'll take that. I'll take that bet. One more. San Francisco 49ers at your Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks are a 5-point favorite. Other than last weekend, Seattle looked pretty great, but also last weekend was the best team they played so far this year. I'll start with you, Perch. How do you see this 49ers Seahawks game?
49ers are tough to figure. They're just, they got waxed by the Dolphins and lost a game to the Eagles, but they looked really good the last 2 weeks. They killed the Patriots and beat a pretty good Rams team. I think they go there and keep it close. I think the Seahawks are just a little bit better, so I think I'm going to take the Seahawks to win, but not cover.
By the way, FC, is Carlos Dunlap playing in that game, or is he still not going to – he won't be eligible yet?
He'll be eligible. He's been COVID tested. Everything was consistent with the Bengals. I think he should be eligible. I'll also take the Seahawks. I don't think they're going to cover that. I think it's going to end up being like a 3-point game. They played 2 tight games last year. I understand the Niners are still pretty well beat up. Not very impressed with Seattle's team. What I am impressed with was DK Metcalf also last week. It's incredible. Had to get mentioned. But, Russell Wilson, the NFL wants him to be the MVP, so I guess I'll take the Niners with the points.
Yeah, I kind of like that too. Backdoor cover for the Niners. I think they're better than a 5-point dog. And Seattle is, they're vulnerable in certain respect on defense. And, for all the talk about what Ben, looking like Tommy Maddox last week, you could argue that, Russell Wilson's picks were worse. I mean, that goal line, the thing that should have been a pick six saved by the hustle of DK Metcalf, that was not a good throw, especially not for a quarterback with the talent of Russell Wilson. That's the thing that doesn't happen very often. So at any rate, I guess I will stick with that for the pick segment. But I just like to point out, gentlemen, you guys made fun of me. The last couple of weeks, the host of the show has been pretty good in the pick segment, including a couple of upsets that like Tampa Bay over Green Bay, like Arizona over the aforementioned Seahawks. Just saying, just because I might fall on my ass this week. So I just wanted to take credit for like half a second before we move on to this week's 5-star matchup. It's a 5-star matchup because we're in it. But this week it's really a 5-star matchup. It's like a 5-star matchup because we're in it, and it's a 5-star matchup because it's a 5-star matchup. One of the most eagerly anticipated games when the schedule came out, and now being that the Steelers are 6-0 and the Ravens are 5-1, even more eagerly anticipated. We drew straws before the game. Perch, you get to go first. Tell us about what's going to happen in the Steelers-Ravens eagerly anticipated matchup.
Not to be cliche, but this game can go either way. I could see the Steelers winning a close game or losing a close game. I could see the Steelers winning by a blowout. I could even see the Ravens winning by a blowout, although I think that's pretty unlikely. Overall, I'm just, hedging my bets a little bit. I'm a big believer in the law of averages. The Steelers probably aren't going to go 16-0, and this will probably be the last game they're an underdog the rest of the year if you look at the schedule. The only other one I could possibly see would be maybe at Buffalo, but that probably end up a pick 'em, or the Steelers are a 1 or 2 point favorite there. So with that said, like I said before, Harbaugh's 10-2 after a bye week. They've had this game circled for a while, so their chance to get back to, the winner of this game is basically the difference between possibly a 1 seed in the AFC or being a 5 seed. So it's, everything's so jumbled up right there. I just think that it's going to be close. I'm going to give the edge to the Ravens just because, like I said, they've got 2 weeks to prepare, and the Steelers have not had as much time. 25-22, Baltimore is my pick.
Yeah, FC, how about you?
Agree with everything Perch said. Could be close, could be a blowout, either way. Every line's up for the Ravens to win. I'll take the Pittsburgh Steelers to win this game 31-23. I think Big Ben makes the plays to win the game. I won't be surprised to see a defensive touchdown by the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think this game is gargantuan to Ben and to Tomlin. And I just think the Steelers might play close to a more complete game on all 3 facets of the game. And I think that the 23 points that the Ravens score might be an illusion. Might be just it looks good, and it looks like the game's going to be closer in the box score than it actually was on the field. I just have a feeling that you're going to get a really motivated Pittsburgh Steelers team.
Yeah, I get that feeling as well. I mean, I think this game will illustrate the difference. The flaw with using analytics alone to try to predict what happens in sports, and particularly in a football game. And I'll explain. I think if you look at what the teams have done, each team has done this year, and for that matter, even taking into account last year down the stretch. On paper, the Ravens are a better team than the Steelers. It's the first time in a long time, with Ben at the helm, that I have felt that was not only true analytically, but that I could actually, as much as I can break it down, I would say that. And a big reason is that traditionally the Baltimore special teams have taken over in close games. I mean, they win a lot of games that are kind of close otherwise. Like the way the Steelers used to win. They play in these close games, and then Ben would make some plays at the end and they would win, and that was their winning formula. And for the Ravens, it's special teams. It's like the field goal kicker gets you a kick that you got no business making, that adds, a little bit of a cushion for your win or is the difference in the game. They're flip field position better than most other teams. Their punter's amazing. So in the past, that would be the difference in this game. And on paper, like I said, if you look at just what they did and don't, you just go by the numbers, Baltimore ought to win this game 25-24 or something like that. But here's the thing. It doesn't account for teams getting better, playing better than they have been, or playing worse than they have been. Or there's no context for that. I agree with what I just heard, that this game, I think, is actually maybe more important to the Steelers than the Ravens. The Ravens have a home game. They're expected to win. They have pressure to win, and I'm sure they would want to beat the Steelers and get themselves back, in the top of the division. Blah blah blah. But for the Steelers, I think this is like are we going to be a special team, or are we just going to be a good team? And I just have this hunch that the Steelers play better this week than they have in the previous 6 games that they've won. They'll have to beat Baltimore. The difference between Baltimore's special teams and the Steelers' special teams now is a lot less than it's been in recent years. As I mentioned before, number 1 in kick coverage, top 5, field goal kicker, top 5 kick return, top 5 or 6 punt return. And even the punter had a good punt last week. So who knows? All bets are off with the punting. But I feel like Steelers are going to out-kick their coverage figuratively, not literally, this week. I like the Steelers to sneak a win they shouldn't get, 27-24 over your Baltimore Ravens. I just feel like it's a game where it doesn't have to make sense on paper. It's Steelers Ravens. I expect a great game, another heart attack, and a close win over the Ravens. Last words, I'll give one to you, Dom.
The Steelers need to play hard, they need to play fast, and they need to finish. Period.
All right. Let's make it happen. Perch, final word.
So you can't go 19-0 until you go 7-0. So here we go.
Yeah, well, the last time they went 7-0 was 78. I think they lost their 8th game, I think. So, yeah, big deal. The other thing is that we didn't mention on the show, for my last word, Mike Tomlin, for what it means, for whatever it means, maybe it means something to him, has the most wins of any minority coach in the history of the NFL. He's tied for the most with Tony Dungy. And I can't think of a better way for him to become the all-time leader in that statistic than a game against the Ravens and coming out victorious. So he's also, we'll talk about this maybe more in the future, but he's not too far away from catching the guy that preceded him, and he's not even that far away from catching the guy who preceded that guy.
Correct.
So I think it's like we're seeing, we always talk about, like, appreciate Ben. He's special, and take his flaws and his good things and lump them all together, and that's who the guy is. And you gotta ride with him. I feel the same way about Mike Tomlin. That we're getting a pretty good coaching performance. Yeah, people are going to argue you could have a better coach, sure, but he's doing something special with the opportunities he's been given. He can only coach the team he has and the quarterback he has, and lately he's been doing a pretty good job of it. Speaking of doing a good job, Perch FC, Smith the Smoking, who couldn't join us tonight. Everyone at SteelerFury.com, and everyone who listens regularly to the show and supports the Sports and Shit, our sponsor, and SteelerFury.com. Listen, I got a suggestion. Let's not worry too much about what's going to happen on Tuesday. Let's win an exciting football game on Sunday. Talk about it next week, and I'll join you gentlemen after a gigantic Steelers victory. In the meantime, I say, go get them, Steelers.
Go Steelers.
Here we go.
SteelerFury.com